Good morning, everyone. I'm going to start off with two questions. Please raise your hand if you are in K-12 education. Oh, good. Excellent, excellent. Raise your hand if you consider yourself to be an activist in the Python community. Okay, perfect. So what I'm going to talk about, I would argue, is of interest to both those communities and why they need to work together, which is Python certification. I'm going to give you a specifically K-12 slant on that, and Chalmer will be following up with a broader look at certification. So real quickly, Elizabeth has given, I have permission to fail, so I'm going to deviate a little bit from my slides, especially since I've been so inspired by the talks this morning, and I think we need to have a conversation about that. So I've been a high school teacher since 1991. I started teaching computer science in 1993. I've been active in the free software movement and in the open educational resource movement for a long time. And I've loved it. I'm a bit of a rebel, and I work for Arlington Public Schools, and they've kind of let me do that. And it's been fun to teach for all these years. I still love teaching. I have 16 students here, and I've told them to mix it up. So please say hi to them, talk to them. They're a little bit shy. They're kind of grouping together. I told them they got to get out and mix it up with y'all. So please do that, and thank you for that. So why do I care about Python certification? Well, I am a CTE teacher, career and technical education, that's what they call me, and I'm going to read this, beginning with first-time ninth graders in 2013-2014 school year, requirements for the standard diploma shall include a requirement to earn a career and technical education credential that has been approved by the board. So it is now mandated for Virginia teachers, CTE teachers, to give certifications. I have resisted this for years. I just tried not to do it because these things can be pretty awful. And now there are 2 Python certifications. And so I'm going to talk about those. So there are some benefits I've seen to the certifications. They provide a common measurable, measurement of skill, and they provide a common reference point for curriculum development. So those are 2 potential positives. The cons, which I personally felt for the longest time way outweigh the pros, are that they limit creativity because they enforce standardization and mediocrity. I mean, seriously, you have a state mandate, and you got to pass this test. And let me tell you, I heard so many innovative things this morning about Raspberry Pis and interesting curriculum. It is dead in the water if teachers are being told that what they have to do is get their kids to pass this Microsoft MTA 98-381 certification, because their job depends on that. And as long as their job depends on that, they're going to have to do that, and they're not going to hear all these other cool things that they might be able to do. So, and also the certifications have a real strong kind of corporate bias, and for me, that's not the kind of thing I want to be communicating. So, within the Virginia Department of Education presently, there are only 2 Python certifications. The first one has been around for a while. It's the one I mentioned. It's part of the Microsoft Technology Associate exam, and it's called Introduction to Programming with Python. The other ones have just emerged on the scene this year. I actually have now taken both of these 2 certifications, so I can tell you a little bit about them if you're a K-12 teacher interested in my thoughts on it. It seems to be that Pearson is developing a whole stack of Python certifications, and Cisco has been partnering with them, so the Virginia DOE approves Cisco's test and Microsoft's test. So I went looking on the web before I gave this talk and said, well, what is best out there if you were going to do certifications? Not surprisingly, Dr. Chuck shows up on the top, right? And but none of these are the certifications. Well, there is this Introduction to Python Absolute Beginner by Microsoft on edX. I haven't seen that. I don't know if that relates to their certification exam. My hunch is it doesn't, but I'll have to check that out further. And so I'm going to go a little bit quickly through these slides to talk about what we might want to do next, because I've only got a couple of minutes. So I did some research, because this is all new. So now you have this thing called the Open Education, Open Edge Python Institute. They're developing this exam, and then Cisco is using it. These are the 3 certifications that they're going to be offering now. The PCAP was the first. I took the PCAP back in October, and the others didn't exist when I was preparing the slides for this. Oh, there's 2 more now. So I'm going to reflect on those. So the PCAP is fairly expensive. So in fact, it's so expensive, our school system's not going to offer it, because we have some deal with Microsoft where we can offer the other one, because we've already paid for some package. And that's the one my students are going to have to take. It does align fairly well with like the Solo Learn course. I found this to be the least offensive of the 2 exams. It's kind of like, they're more like AP puzzle type tests. They're short. They're testing the syntax of the Python programming language. I found it to be fairly challenging. I've been a high school teacher for many, many years, but I learned some Python tricks in preparing for it. So it was of the 2 the least offensive. This is not the one I'm going to be giving. I have to give the MTA 98-381 because we can offer that unlimited times for free already. That exam was horrible. I can't tell you enough about how it is a lot of reading. It's not at all ELL friendly. I mean, I had students who should have known Python fail that test because you're driven through this time thing where you have to answer a bunch of questions after reading droll text. And in fact, I describe it as having an unintentional corporate drone bias in the theme of the thing. You know, you read this, oh, you're the manager of such and such region, and you've got to, you know, what high school kid's going to care about that? And then you answer some little question about that. So that's really pretty awful. And that's what we're giving right now. So in the interest of hacking that situation, because I went looking for, let me back up. So in the interest of looking for resources to help students prepare, there's tons of them, but you have to pay for most of them. Everybody's commodifying their prep for this exam that's required. And I've got a group of students who'll be pitching a mini sprint this afternoon. We've started to create our own power through Python certification. So at least we can make a problem out of together solving this thing that we all have to do. It's not, my students are actually in a dual enrolled program that is going to give them an associate degree in computer science when they finish school. And now actually what I'm interested in after hearing Dr. Chuck is teaching his program, right? I mean, what you laid out is pretty much what I'm already working on, and a series of courses, all open source. We need a certification. So we need to find a way as the Python community to have a certification that we have some input into, because we don't have any input into this. And if we ignore this problem, and we have for a long time, we didn't want anything to do with it, that was fine. But for me, I can't avoid it. I'm a public school teacher. Virginia has mandatory K-12 computer science standards now. We have to teach computer science all across the state, all across the grades, and this certification is part of that. So having an approved certification that the Python community had some input into would be such a wonderful thing, I think, for our community. And thank you very much.
I appreciated Jeff's comments. I'm going to elaborate on those a little bit, especially toward the end. My name is Chalmer. Tell you a little bit about who I am and kind of the role that I have in terms of certs and the types of certs that I've pursued, and the things that I've seen in acquiring and looking at some of those certifications. I work for a company called Booz Allen Hamilton. I do cybersecurity related things. I also do a lot of data analysis and data science types of things. I do a lot of teaching. I've taught in the collegiate field and in the commercial field. I teach in my client space. I teach to people at Booz Allen Hamilton. I teach at meetups, et cetera, et cetera. And I help run the Education Summit every year. I think this is my 5th year helping to facilitate the Education Summit. I am a certification holder. I don't necessarily say that proudly. I do have some. I am an exam author for certification exams. These are some of the certs that I have. Again, none of these are particularly things that I necessarily hold up proudly, etc. They're just there. Many of them I acquired because either I got a chance to take it, my employer might have paid for it, or because I felt like it might be a way to influence my resume so that decisions might sway my direction when I wanted to get a new job or take on a new opportunity. Jeff mentioned a couple of certs that are out there. There is another cert out there that is related to Python. It's the GPYC. The GPYC is a cert that is associated with GIAC, the Global Information Assurance Certification. They're an organization that is focused on information assurance or cybersecurity. GIAC has a wide variety of certifications that they offer. This one is the only one they have that's related to Python. GIAC's sister organization, SANS, which stands for Sysadmin Audit Network and Security, those folks offer a class that helps you prepare and get ready to be able to pass the GPYC certification. Later on, you'll be able to get the slides and the URLs to get to some more details about these are at the bottom of this slide in the small font. The skills that are covered in the GPYC are a lot of the typical types of things that you might see in any sort of kind of Python class. How do you make executables? What are data structures? All those kind of things. There is a focus or a nuance, though, to this class. This class was intended for penetration testers, people who are doing vulnerability assessments, people who have an interest in cybersecurity and information assurance. So there is a bit of kind of a leaning toward that. But nonetheless, while learning those really cool cybersecurity skills, getting your hacker on, if you will, you're also learning a lot of cool Python. In terms of some of the details for this particular cert, the exam is proctored by Pearson VUE. It is 75 questions. It's about a 2-hour exam. The cost of the test is close to $800. If you wanted to take the SANS class, it's $6,600 to take a 6-day class. Okay. A little bit of confession time here. We're all amongst friends, so I'll tell you the truth. I worked for SANS. I worked for GIAC back in around 2010. I reviewed course content that was delivered in some of the SANS classes. There were several of them. And I authored exam questions. So back in 2010, I had a very good view into how GIAC went about creating questions that they used to kind of assess people's skills. I do not currently work for them. I've not worked for them for about 8 years. But I just want to get that out there, right? And let you know that the next few slides, these are my opinions. These are all buyer beware, okay? So I'll talk a little bit about the pros of kind of the GIAC certifications, et cetera. We'll talk a little bit about the cons. And then we'll close off with, much like Jeff was talking about, how does the Python community create a certification for the Python community that meets the needs that we have, right? So in terms of some of the pros for the GIAC certification, they generally have a fairly strong reputation. When I speak to people who are looking, say, to hire folks in the cybersecurity field, and they see a certification from GIAC that tends to lend a certain amount of weight, I don't want to characterize how much, but a certain amount. So that registers on a resume to a hiring manager, those kind of things. The weight that they carry is often a little higher than some of the certifications you might see from other organizations, right? So they have a strong reputation in the community. Based on my experiences both in reviewing the author content and in writing exam questions, I feel like they had a very high level of quality in those exams. They put a lot of professional effort into the things like regular and consistent review processes, multiple levels of review. I got many of my questions kicked back like, hey, can we clean these things up in various ways? They use a lot of psychometric types of evaluations to get a quantitative answer. Does this question essentially address the types of things that you want to have addressed? They run them through a whole series of test exams so that people who've already passed the certifications, they'll take these new questions and make sure that those questions are answerable by people who have the skills that we've already claimed that they had. The training content is generally fairly spot on. In terms of the focus for this particular cert, because there's that cybersecurity focus, that helps to bring somebody's resume a little closer to two different skill sets, both of which are in high demand: the ability to automate and program, as well as the ability to address things from a cybersecurity perspective. So that extra focus on cybersecurity could be a pro. It could be neutral. In terms of cons, the biggest con, probably the cost, right? We were talking, Jeff was mentioning some of the costs of the certs he talked about, and there's a significant difference just for the cert, much less for the classes, right? I have no recommendation here about, gee, you or your students should go out and get this particular cert. So I'm not going to say that it is a worthwhile thing. That's a decision I'll let other people make. But what I am interested in, and what we'll talk about here for the last couple of minutes, is what makes a cert worthwhile. And if the open source community pursues trying to build a cert that we want to stand behind, what should be included in that? Certainly the class qualities that will help people prepare for a cert. I mean, that's fundamental, and I think that's something that we can all get behind, right? Classes need to be well designed. The learning experience should be high quality as well. The exams themselves, if you are looking to create a certification exam, the exam must be relevant, and it must have the backing of things like psychometrics. Can we check to see if the question is a valid question, is it a reasonable question? Is it simply rote memorization, or is it application? Is it assessment? Those kinds of considerations. Does the cert have perceived quality? Again, if I'm looking at a resume and I see a cert by organization X, or I see a cert by organization Y, and I feel that organization Y has consistently delivered staff to me who have skills that are represented by that cert on the resume, right? So a cert we produce must have perceived quality, and people must be able to see that cert and go, yeah, I know what's behind that cert, and I know what to expect when I bring that person onto my team. And there has to be some level of perceived return on investment, right? A lot of the SAN certifications, those are actually funded by companies. Large companies will go out and they'll pay money to send their employees to get a SAN certification. So those employees could then be offered up to clients, et cetera. Like, we have people with these certs, those kind of things. So if a company is going to invest in getting a cert that this open source community comes up with, they have to have a sense they're going to get a return on their investment. And open source is often very low cost, right? So that's probably an easy bar to make, but it's definitely something we need to consider. All right. And that's the end of Jeff and I's essentially kind of foray into this conversation. I hope that over the next couple of hours, when we get into sprints and stuff, if folks have thoughts or ideas, I'm sure Jeff and I would both love to hear those things. We'd love for you to share with us what you feel ought to be included in certs. And hopefully, as we as a community over the next 6 months, 12 months, years, we can start to look at what does a cert mean and what should be in a cert, and what can we do to ensure that certifications that are useful and meaningful to us and to our students can promulgate. And with that, my time is about up. So I'll be around afterwards for questions.